Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. Today we're kicking off the series on backlog systems. If you are working in product like many of our listeners, you've likely encountered a backlog system along the way. If you haven't, hopefully this series will help you in that space. So let's hop in. How you doing, Moshe?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
Excellent. Me too. This is really going to the basics for tools for product managers, because that's other than maybe, a Word or Google Docs applications, using backlog is the basics for product management, right?
Right.
And some people will tell you, we do it with Excel spreadsheets, and they might have their place out there. Who knows?
Yeah.
But when you say backlog, usually people will right away think about Jira.
They do. Yeah.
And we did. We're actually doing a survey right now on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And most of the people actually are using Jira.
Yeah.
I have to check the results right now, but I think it's probably maybe 80% of the respondents
for the Jira. Yeah, it's definitely when I think of backlog, I definitely think of Jira, and that was my introduction to it. So I've used Jira in a couple of different prior roles, and Jira was my first introduction to a backlog system and all that comes along with it. So its presence in the product tool stack is everywhere pretty much. Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm actually wrong. It's not 80%. So LinkedIn surveys have only 4 options. So I put Jira, Azure DevOps, and Pivotal Tracker in there, and then I put other.
Yeah.
So 57% of the people right now are saying they're using Jira. 20% are saying they're using Azure DevOps.
Okay.
3% Pivotal Tracker, and 20% other.
Okay.
So maybe that's where the distribution is. If I'm looking Jira versus the things I listed, other than the others, that might be the 80% where I had it in my head.
Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, so that's interesting. That 20% of the other is an interesting space.
And you know what? Ask people that are voted for other, what are they using? And I got different names, and some of them even told me we're still using Excel spreadsheets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Excel's everywhere. Yeah.
But there are definitely a lot of tools out there. So there is, of course, the Jira, there is Azure DevOps, which is a Microsoft product. There is Pivotal Tracker. I don't know how many people actually know about Pivotal Tracker. I put it over there because I used it in the past.
Okay.
So maybe I was a bit biased about what will be the third one I will put in there.
Yeah.
But also, tools like Trello could be somehow put in there.
Yeah, that's what I had experience with that in the past. It's not as robust, but it's good for small teams.
Very small teams, I would say.
Yeah, and it's part of the Atlassian suite of tools, right? So
exactly. I started using them even before Atlassian bought them. And then when they bought them, it was interesting to see how would it compete with Jira. But I think they bought it because it doesn't really compete with Jira.
Yeah.
It is for different use cases, and it's much smaller operations and much smaller projects.
Yeah.
Personal stuff.
I was using it individually. I was making sure that I had stuff to be done.
Exactly. So for personal stuff, it's good. And this is where I actually think we should name the series not just backlogs, but Backlog and Agile Boards.
Okay.
Because the backlog is part of it, but then also there is that Agile board. It could be a Kanban, could be a Scrum, could be whatever it is. And usually they all come together in the same thing. And this is where Excel spreadsheet does not really fit the bill, because Excel spreadsheet usually will not be, it doesn't have an Agile board in there.
Right.
You might be able to say, doing now, next, later. But it's very, I would say in Excel spreadsheet, or in a spreadsheet of any type of spreadsheet, it's much more cumbersome to do.
You're much more updating cells as opposed to moving cards on a board.
Exactly. So if we're talking about Jira, it has, of course, the agile boards in there. If you're talking about Azure DevOps, it has that. Trello is more of a board than a backlog.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you could still have like all of your items listed in that board, if you may. And then, other products are like Asana, Exosoft, Clubhouse.io. They renamed it to Shortcut, I guess, because of Clubhouse, the other Clubhouse that came as a storm last year or 2 years ago. When someone told me he's using a year ago, I think, is using Clubhouse, I'm like, why do you use Clubhouse for your backlog and Agile?
Yeah.
And then he told me it's a different product. And then I saw they changed the name to Shortcut. Version 1 is another one, interesting one. I actually used it. That was the first one I used even before Jira. And then when I used it, we decided to move to Jira. It wasn't really doing it for us, version 1. But one of the people that mentioned that they were using other, when I asked them what it is, they said it's version 1. So people are still using that.
Okay.
So there are tools out there. We'll see who we will be able to get as guests for that. But we have right now someone lined up for ClickUp. ClickUp is up and coming. Mm-hmm. That seems that lots of people really love it. We'll see what that buzz is all about.
Yep.
I wonder if people are also using Monday.com, because Monday.com is more for project management. Mm-hmm. And same thing with Trello and Asana, they were for project management. So this is maybe where it's coming from a board, and then you have the backlog somehow part of that, rather than you have a backlog and then you have also the board and they're working with each other.
Yeah, and I had seen the Monday.com more of a swim lane Gantt chart style setup to where you had your different epics and drilled ultimately down into like user stories and stuff like that. But it integrated with Jira.
Oh,
it had a different use case.
Mm-hmm. So it will be interesting to see if we can talk with a product manager that is using Monday.com without Jira or without one of the other products. Just that, right?
Just that, yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what will come up. This will be an interesting series for sure. Mainly because it's so basic that we're thinking like, oh, maybe we don't even have to talk about it.
Yeah.
And we never started with that. We did so many series before.
Yeah.
And only now in episode 51, we're getting to talk about that.
Yeah. We're like, well, we need to go back and talk about that. Because I think that, a lot of people that come into an organization, whether they're a product manager or a product analyst, they're using what the company has. And typically one of the first things that a company acquires from a tool stack is one of these kind of backlog tools. That's like the first box you check. But that doesn't mean a company that is a startup or a company that's up and coming can't make a switch over or can't find something that
absolutely.
So I think again we have a good opportunity to highlight some of the things out there that might displace or disrupt the industry. Obviously with Atlassian and Jira, they have a big presence, and I've started using Azure DevOps, which you as well use. And coming from the Microsoft stack, I found it to be a fairly easy transition from the Jira over. And something I actually do like about it, it does have, since it is a CI/CD, maybe that's how it originally started or originally purposed. You do have the developer experience on there as well. And I'm not sure I got that from my experience with Jira, that the developers were in the backlog, they were in the different boards and stuff, but from a pipeline, CI/CD pipeline, and
so Atlassian has lots of tools that are dedicated for that.
Okay.
And it all depends on what tools your organization is using from Atlassian.
Yeah.
If they're just using Jira, that's one thing. But if they're using is it Bitbucket? They have lots of tools.
It is Bitbucket. Yeah, it is Bitbucket. Yeah. But is it a standalone? But is it like a standalone? Do you have to like add on to it?
That's I can't answer. I don't know. But maybe when we talk with Jira, someone that is working with Jira. I mean, all of us are working with Jira in one way.
Because from my experience, it was broken out and modularized, very similar to Confluence. So I had an app for Jira, I had an app for Confluence, and I had an app for Bitbucket. Whereas with the DevOps, it's all kind of on one.
It's all together. You're right. So they take a bit of different approach over there for that. Yeah. So it's when you go into Azure DevOps, you have the boards, you have the backlogs, you have and all the other tools, everything in one place. But you still have to configure that, and you have to say which one you're going to use and all of that stuff. So and licensing, etc.
Yep.
And as product managers, usually we don't touch these things. We would usually touch mostly the backlog and the boards. They have also Azure DevOps have also a module for retrospectives, so you can do your retrospectives over there, and these can become actions in the retrospective, can become a task or a story in your backlog. So these things are working hand in hand, and there is other things in there. There is also portfolio is an interesting one, and this also is relevant for product managers, but not so much from a backlog and agile boards perspective, but more from a higher level than that. It's related more to what we're talking about roadmaps and having roadmaps for multiple products and how they all affect each other. Yep. So Atlassian, at least when I used it a few years ago, they had this portfolio module or application that you can integrate and connect it with Jira and Confluence. And I believe also that Microsoft has that in Azure DevOps. But this is beyond what we want to chat about, the basics of a backlog and a board. Now the question is, to be a good board and a good backlog system, what does it have to have? What should we expect it to have, and what does it mean? I think that we can spend hours probably to answer this question. But let's think about a few things that are important for us as product managers. What do we feel needs to be a good things in there?
For me, the ability to set up epics, features, user stories, and to be able to construct them in a way that are easy for development to understand and execute on, and the various elements that make up those different epics and stories and such, in the configuration of them. So being able to assign them and put them in various states, assign various efforts to them, identify the value, the different paths they're going to take to assign it to certain people. Basically, it comes down to the configuration of the different tickets that you put into a backlog. And I think that's an important thing to have. Because at the end of the day, that you're trying to communicate with development. So, just putting tickets in there for the sake of putting tickets in there, you need to have a system that enables you to provide as much clarity as possible for the development team to go and execute the plan.
Yeah. One thing that I find a bit challenging with Azure DevOps, and this goes back to trying to answer this question, what will be, my ultimate backlog, is that the backlog over there is not like every item has like one place on the list. When you think about the backlog, every item should have its own place in the list and should never have two items in the same place, meaning the same priority or the same level of priority. With Azure DevOps, I find it a bit more tricky to do that because things are broken over there by epics and features, etc. And it might be the way I'm using Azure DevOps. In Jira, that was actually something that I usually was able to visualize and see, okay, this is my full backlog and everything is like listed and no item is on the same level as any other item. But Jira had its own issues with that as well, because it was hard to see things in context, where you can see things in context, at least and I know that at the time, again, I don't know what was changed in Jira in the last few years. I'm using Azure DevOps now for almost 3 years, I would guess.
Yeah, I'm very new to it. So.
Yeah. So I know people would always request to see that, where is show me like a tree, show me a tree structure. Where is those in the context of where they are? And I'm not really sure what's the best solution for that. We'll see what ClickUps and the others came up with. But in general, when you have a big backlog, and that's another question we should probably raise, but it's unrelated to the tool we are using. Maybe the tools can help with that. But when we have big backlogs, are very hard to manage. And really, we should limit our backlog to a certain size. We cannot really manage hundreds and hundreds of items in a backlog. It's unmanageable. And I used some rules in the past that other people told me about, and seems logical, that if something is in the backlog for more than a few months or a year or whatever it is, you just delete it or you move it out of the backlog. So then what happened is we had this archive, or we had parking lot, which is another name for another backlog, a lower priority backlog.
It's out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. And actually what happens today, I also do a bit of a weird thing with my developers, my teams, with the backlog in Azure DevOps, because we're using different boards to expose the team to the work that is coming. So this way they don't see the full backlog unless they go to my board, but on their board, they will only see things that me or the product owner or whoever it is assign specifically to them. So over there, it will be much more limited to what they're seeing. And then there will be priority in there. So there is almost going to be, its own backlog within that, which you might call sometimes like a sprint backlog or epic backlog or something like that. So then the question, this raises the question, what type of backlogs are out there? And all of these complexities make our work harder.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So how do these tools are making them easier for us? Yeah.
I'm trying to think of when I came over from Jira, I was used to creating filters in Jira to be able to filter my backlog and filter my boards to what I was actually working on. Because as you mentioned, a backlog can get very large. And if you're not involved in everything on the backlog, if you're handling a particular product in the backlog, you don't necessarily want to see everything at once, and you don't necessarily want to go through all the filters to get to it every time. So something I would do is I would actually set up a query filter in Jira. And I noticed that DevOps has that query feature as well. So I've started utilizing that as well to get to what I was really looking for. I've not been somewhere where we had a parking lot. So typically the backlog would just continue to grow indefinitely because everyone was like, well, if we get rid of it and someone down the road asks for it, we're not going to have it anymore. So,
why? Yeah.
It always brings up the question of, do they really need it? Do they really care about it? What's the likelihood of they're going to come back and ask about it? If they do ask about it, we'll create a new one.
Yeah.
That's that idea.
And actually, this is where feedback systems works better. Because with a feedback system, you can have all of this listed. It doesn't have to be in your backlog necessarily. It could then move into the backlog. But a feedback system, if someone is asking for something, you associate it with the item, and then you see how many people are asking for that. And we talked about it before with roadmap, product board, and and Roadbank. They had these feedback systems, and then you can associate items with them. And they are also integrated in, that's where we talked about Jira and Azure DevOps in the past, and where I mentioned in previous episodes that everyone knows that I'm using Azure because I mentioned it a few times about integrations, right? So integrations is also one of those things that are important for us because these days things are always connected. And it always seems that because Jira is so prevalent, it's the first one that companies are integrating with, and then others. Now, those others are usually Azure DevOps. I don't know what others. So I don't know if like ClickUp or Trello or others or Asana. I think Asana I've seen around it. People are also.
Yeah, I've seen Asana.
But it might be that the integrations will have to come from the provider rather than from the other companies. So from Asana or from Shortcut, they might have to do the integration rather than wait for the other applications to integrate with them. Right? Yeah. So there is that's another interesting point there.
Yeah, integrations is important because to that note, from my experience with Jira, we were using a tool called Loom, which records interviews, videos, experiences, and that actually integrated with your Jira. So if you were setting up a story, you could actually do a recording, and that would be embedded within your ticket, And I found that to be very valuable for developers, so they can actually witness whether it be a bug or a new feature request.
Yeah.
They could actually witness it without pulling me in and having me demo it or something. That was
That's
one. And then we had another thing called User Snap, which is a feedback system that actually sits within the application. The user hits feedback, they can record a screen, and that actually could get sent off to Jira. And that would actually create a ticket. Usually if you have a bug or something that the customer identifies, they can actually self-report it. So those are two integrations that I really enjoy with Jira. I don't know yet if they have that kind of stuff with DevOps. They probably do at some point, but
and that's the thing. It's they seems to always lag behind with this type of integration.
Yeah.
So they already have a lot because it's Microsoft.
Yep.
And that was one of the reasons we moved to Azure DevOps, is because we were a Microsoft house and we wanted to be everything on Microsoft.
Yep.
So it made sense to us because it was already integrated with everything else and the cloud and all of that good stuff.
Yep.
So it kind of makes sense. And so at the time, it wasn't about how many systems out there are integrated with Azure DevOps and how expendable it's going to be, but it's more about how does it work in our ecosystem, in our stack. Exactly. Yeah. The other thing that I'm looking in these systems is, how flexible they are to set up things, identify, your fields that you want to track in your on your tickets, your story, your bugs, whatever it is, your flows and stuff like that. And most of these systems, I believe, are quite flexible. There is a lot of power over there. Jira could be actually very dangerous in that respect because you could do a lot of flows over there that no one will really understand or use. So I actually implemented Jira at one of the companies I used to work for. And my approach was, let's take whatever is out of the box and try to fit it to that, rather than try to create a whole new flow and then get our head wrapped around it, and we'll never get out of this. But I've seen also implementation of very complex workflows on Jira. So it's possible.
Yeah.
But then it's harder to manage and all of that stuff. And usually, and after I did that, I gave it away to our DevOps team to manage, because I didn't want to do that for long term. I didn't want to do DevOps. I wanted to be a product manager. But
exactly. Yeah.
We were using such a bad tool before that. I don't even remember the name. I might look at that, but it was such a bad tool, really.
Yeah.
That it probably still exists. I convinced the company to move to Jira, and I was like, let me implement it. And at that time, also the cloud version was available, so there was no problem. We didn't have to. Before that, you had to install it on premise and all of that stuff. So the cloud was already available. So we just got some licenses, and it was really easy transition for us to move to that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Another point I wanted to mention, just going back to the idea of the ability to configure a ticket with all the different fields that are available, is that ultimately can become a dashboard. So, we're able to track things in a dashboard with different visuals and metrics. Previous roles, we weren't always doing that or doing that well. So that's another aspect, being able to track what you want to track with your various tickets and configurations, so that your team can know where they stand, what they need to improve on. And that kind of goes back to the reviews and retrospectives, as you mentioned. So that's just another thing that mentioned. I have seen that in DevOps.
Yeah. And that's you could do that also in Jira for sure.
Yeah,
There's a lot of dashboard functionalities over there. But we're not here really to talk about these different systems, although we're kind of like, from our experience, we're getting into it already.
Yeah, that's true.
We're more to see what are we going to expect in this series, and then what do we want to learn? Yeah,
for sure. Even based on our experiences, like I just mentioned, there's things that I have not seen before, didn't know. Like we weren't using dashboards necessarily in Jira. Maybe somebody we speak to is, and they can emphasize the importance of it or how they're actually using it. So, to the original thing you said, this isn't just backlogs. I mean, these systems are a bunch of other modules and a bunch of other functionality that comes along with them from the various boards and so on and so forth. So, I'm curious to hear not only what other tools are out there, but even what these tools that you and I have experienced, what other things can they do? And because I can't say that I'm utilizing everything that Jira had or that DevOps has. So that's what I'm anxious to hear about for sure.
Yeah, perfect. Good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It might not be as exciting as Startup Series or No Code Series, but I think it's still important.
I do too. I think it's important because, like the intro said, everyone's either has encountered them in the past or will eventually, whether you're getting into new in product or looking to get into product at some point, you're going to run into a backlog system.
Exactly.
Whether you like it or not. So
exactly. And I would be surprised. Well, actually, that's not a good statement, what I was trying to say, but about being using an agile board versus not using an agile board. I know there are still companies doing waterfall, and I know that companies are doing other type of agile that are not really agile.
Yeah.
So, but I think they are still using some type of boards. So they probably have to manage the work some way.
Yeah, right. And so this could be an opportunity for a listener to say, hey, I heard about these other tools. Even if you don't bring on a Jira or a DevOps, maybe there's some other tools like ClickUp that you might recommend to your organization to say, hey, maybe we don't need to use Excel anymore. Maybe we can look into one of these other products on the market that are up and coming like ClickUp. I think that's good for listeners as well.
Absolutely.
Very good. Perfect. Looking forward to it.
Same here.
Fun.
Same here.
Please, listeners, send us feedback. We love to hear from our listeners, and we look forward to talking more about Backlog with all of you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.